Although he appears to be healthy, he perhaps has the physique that you or many individuals want, but his insides are screaming for help. If you came to the hospital, you didn't know it was TNF, and you saw this, you would say, bro has a problem, a very serious condition. Coach Greg, in today's video, it's time for a natty or not on none other than Joel, aka TNF. He recently posted his blood work and he only showed his testosterone, telling the world, look, I'm natural because my testosterone levels are lower than you. Many people in the comments were saying, this isn't possible. How could your testosterone be that low with all that muscle? This is proof that you probably just went on SARMs and you cycled off after all. If you actually had natty blood work, why didn't you post all of it? And so I understood the people's questions. And so I wrote him and said, hey, look, you gotta send me your blood work. I gotta do a video and see once and for all, are you actually natty? This doesn't prove or disprove natty status, but it lends credibility to not natty IMO. Nice off cycle. I mean, anyone on gear can come off for 4 weeks and have the same test levels. Doesn't really prove anything. TNF responded by saying, that would be a good argument if I didn't consistently post blood work. 4 weeks before, it was 280, LOL. 4 weeks prior to this blood work, he had testosterone levels at 280 nanograms per deciliter, and now it's only 158. And so what exactly is going on? Is it possible that TNF, or for example, using SARMs or using other performance-enhancing drugs, causing his body to suppress? And so in today's video, we find out. Now, before going into his blood work, let us first examine his physique, his face, his telltale signs. Does he have gynecomastia? Is he full of acne? Is he losing his hair? The first thing I notice is, why is TNF almost always wearing a sweater? He lives in Texas. It's very, very hot in this environment. And so why is he always cold? Is something going on? Is he on an overly restrictive diet? Does he have thermoregulatory problems? Does he in fact have low thyroid function? What exactly is going on? I mean, I can remember back in my day when I was competing, it was the summertime, and when I was dieting, I was cold no matter what. Is he suffering from some kind of a condition? Next, in examining his face, does he have any signs of hypothyroidism? If you examine the outer 1/3 of his eyebrows towards here, right out against here, you can see severe thinning. He's losing his eyebrow hair, and that is a telltale sign of hypothyroidism. Next, examining his hairline, it is in fact receding. He is in fact admitting this, and it's in a non-androgenic sequence. It's not a sign from using steroids, but rather from something else. Despite the fact that he does in fact appear healthy. I mean, his physique, it's healthy, he's strong, he has lots of muscle, but the hair, the skin, the nails, they can oftentimes be the first sign of a problem. Is he in fact suffering from malnutrition? Does he have some form of a disease? Well, it in fact could be the case. And so I reached out to him. I said, are you in fact taking anything for your hair? He said, I'm taking Doucette. Remember, this is not banned by WADA. It doesn't make him a fake natty. And he informed me that it was in fact topical. And so he's rubbing Doucette on top of his hair, trying to prevent hair loss. He's a young man. He says he's not abusing steroids. And so what exactly could be the cause? Now remember, although it is in fact topical, he's not taking it orally through the mouth. This topical Doucette, it can and will become systemic, meaning it will go throughout his body and be indicated in his blood work. Now, in various videos, now I understand it is in fact Texas, but even indoors, he does appear to be very shiny. You can see his skin is glistening with moisture. It's unlikely that he's spraying water on his face or that he's moisturizing his skin like that of a girl. And so is it not possible that this is cold sweats? And so he does appear to be very pale, lacking the proper tan, and diaphoretic. Also, when TNF is flexing, posing hard and last time, grunting, grimacing, flexing for all he's worth, he doesn't have the typical redness in the face. There's no apparent change in skin color whatsoever. And so these findings, although very subtle to you, they can be very important when making a diagnosis. And so when making a diagnosis, it's important to consider everything. Look at the person, their appearance. What do they look like? What do they think like? What do they sound like? And in comparison to that, what does the blood work indicate? With one and out the other, it's very difficult to make any form of a conclusion. And so the first thing that's concerning, at least for me, is that his body essentially is shutting down. He appears to be healthy, jacked, strong, dieting for bodybuilding. And yes, he's on a calorie-reduced diet, but it's not as if he's 5 or 6% body fat. He isn't 1 week out. He's at least perhaps 3 months out and or more. And so this is a long time. It is very early for your body to shut down to this extent. Testosterone levels of 160 and 4 weeks prior to that, 280. This is actually very bad. Any normal person who went to their doctor, for example, if they went to Algorex, had their blood work taken, of which of course you could do, doctor most likely could prescribe testosterone and clomiphene. They could prescribe something as you are unwell. Consecutive blood works, 280 nanograms per liter, followed by 160. This is horrible, horrendous. Yeah, if he was a month out, up till the show, hey, fine. But to function for months with this kind of suppression, it isn't normal nor recommended. And so based on his blood work, we examined the LH. It's only at 1. This is very, very low. His body's experiencing secondary hypogonadism. His hypothalamus has decided, we don't need you to bother making testosterone. Like, what would be the point? And so what we see with his LH and FSH, this is typical of somebody who's malnourished, somebody on a starvation diet, not somebody who's on performance-enhancing drugs. With performance-enhancing drugs, namely steroids, SARMs, and so on, LH would typically be even lower than 1. For example, it would be 0.1, but it's at 1. Although low, it's not so low that it indicates that he's a fake natty. It simply indicates that he isn't eating appropriately for his body. His SHBG, it's also above 60. Typically, people using steroids, SHBG is going to crash. And so extremely unlikely that he could have used steroids and then hopped off. It wouldn't have had the time to go back up to normal. And so this is, to me, indicative of him being a natural, but just on an improper diet. His low total testosterone, it fits perfectly well with having low total estrogen. And so this is a normal person's blood work who is suffering from an improper diet, not somebody who's abusing performance-enhancing drugs. And so essentially, this is the male equivalent of the female athlete triad, where athletes are not eating enough. They're suffering from problems. For example, for females, they're going to have amenorrhea. They're going to have bone density loss. They're not getting enough energy and calories. And so they need to eat more. And so he's the male equivalent of a woman who's not eating enough and is suffering the consequences. Although he appears to be healthy, he perhaps has the physique that you or many individuals want, but his insides are screaming for help. He's not on growth hormone. His IGF-1, it's about 113. It's almost at the bottom of the barrel. It's very, very low. And so all of the hormones of the body that help you to build muscle, they're essentially gone. And so essentially, this is all because the hypothalamus, which decides what is going on in the body, has decided, yeah, I'm going on strike. I don't like what you're doing. If this was 1,000 years ago, or perhaps 10,000 years ago, it would be thinking, okay, he's probably the winter. He's in a famine. He can't hunt and gather the foods that he needs. And so this is not the time to procreate. And so if I were to guess, I would assume that his sexual drive, his libido, his ability to perform would be horrendous at this point, and it would only continue to get worse as he's getting leaner. Yes, he's lean, but he's not stage lean. And so imagine if he continues to diet, adds in more and more cardio, decreases his calories, lowers his body fat. If it's already this bad, it's only going to continue to get worse. And so his free T3, it's 1.4. It's very, very low. This is also not good. And so this is not the blood work of somebody that you would say is healthy. If you came to the hospital, you didn't know it was TNF, and you saw this, you would say, bro has a problem, a very serious condition. The thyroid hormones are important for all organs of the human body, and having decreased thyroid hormones, it's very poor for even cognitive function. And so just like steroids can make you dumber, having low thyroid function can cause permanent learning difficulties and so on. It's not something you want to take lightly. And next is his DHEA. also shut down. And so everything is shutting down. His body is shutting down and is trying to fight back. And don't forget, DHEA is a very important neurosteroid for your brain. You do not want to be deficient in that. And so MRI studies have shown that people who are, you know, that word that rhymes with rexia, people who do that can suffer from permanent brain damage. If you're younger, like a teenager, oftentimes they can get it back. But if you're an older individual, not that TNF is old, but if you're approaching 30 or beyond, very hard to get that back. And so when you continuously diet like this for natural drug-tested bodybuilding competitions, you're at risk for cognitive decay. When you think of it, is it worth competing in a natural bodybuilding competition to win that trophy, to place first place, but then have to suffer with cognitive decline for the rest of your life? And so I could easily make the argument that TNF would be far more healthy by being on, for example, TRT, peptides, hormones, you name it, than being natty. Normally, I would say natural is better than being enhanced. But in TNF's case, when you're malnourished, when you're not eating enough, when you're starving your body to win first place in a bodybuilding competition, it's very easy to see that even using performance-enhancing drugs would be healthier than not. And remember, just because you're using a peptide, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Is it cheating to use various medications in natural bodybuilding competitions? Well, yes. TNF is not going to cheat. But is it worth being natty in a bodybuilding competition when being natty can negatively affect your life? And so, for example, starving, and remember, if you're doing it because you have a disorder, if you're doing it because you're trying to win a bodybuilding competition, and this is coming from somebody who did 59 bodybuilding competitions, clearly I've done this many more times than Joel. And so perhaps I've lost half of my brain cells. Imagine how much smarter Coach Greg would be right now if he hadn't done all those natty competitions. And so, for example, it can cause epigenetic changes. So when you get older and you're no longer on these diets, you could more easily develop type 2 diabetes. There are changes that can result that you would not expect that will only affect you when you're older. And so Joel might feel okay right now, but what about when he's 40, 50, 60, 79? Next, here's the bad news. Since his last blood work, he's developed macrocytic anemia. This is a symptom of a disease. And of course, this could be any one of several different types of disease, and we cannot be certain exactly which one. And so the first question I asked him was, do you consume a lot of vitamin B12? Because whether he did or not, it made a significant difference. He responded, yes, I consume a ton of vitamin B12, which led to this exact conclusion. It cannot be a deficiency in vitamin B12, but it could be a symptom of liver disease or thyroid disease. And of course, everyone knows this. It could be blood loss with reticulocytosis. You all know that. I mean, who doesn't know these things? This is such basic information. Everyone who looks up blood work would know this. And so I certainly hope it isn't that, because we don't want a TNF to have colon cancer. Blood loss could be a result of this. We hope for the best of him, but when you're doing blood work analysis, you have to look at everything, because here's the thing. This is what I notice all the time. People get blood work done, and no matter what they have wrong, anything off, they say, oh, but it's dieting. Oh, but I trained hard that day. Oh, but I was dehydrated. Oh, but I was on steroids. Yeah, well, what's the point of looking at blood work if you have potential negative consequences and you do nothing about them? And so you do need to be cognizant that what you're doing, if you're looking at blood work, it's important to consider all of the options. Now, next, his liver enzymes. They're both elevated, ALT, AST. They're about 80, both. This is not a typical sign of using SARMs. Typically, you would see one higher than the other. They're both about the same, and they're both constantly elevated. And so typical person is, oh, but I train hard. Yeah, it could be from training hard, but there are other alternatives. What you want to see is the AST higher than the ALT. That would be normal. But in this case, they're almost exactly the same. And so what this suggests is hepatocellular damage. This is not good. And so when you consider that the MCV is high as well as ALT and AST, this combination of all of them, this increases the likelihood that he does in fact have a liver issue. TNF says, this is normal for somebody who's dieting. Well, actually, it isn't. If it was normal for somebody to have it like this when they're dieting, then they shouldn't be dieting. TNF he shouldn't actually compete. Competing isn't for everyone. He already has an amazing career. He has lots of fans. And so why risk your health? I mean, if he was 4 weeks out, I'd say, okay, just get it to show over with and retire. But considering he has months and months and months of this, things are only going to get worse. And so, in my opinion, he needs to do something about it. And so we still need to talk more about anemia. And we've looked at his iron stores, no problem. This is not an issue. And so he can't just supplement with iron to take care of this problem. And so what else could it be? If he is in fact having cold sweats, and that's combined with his anemia, this could in fact be an indication of something much more serious, something, for example, like cancer. Priority number 1 for TNF is to try and find out exactly what is causing the anemia. If he can find that cause, then he can get rid of the problem. But without that understanding, then this blood work is for naught. And so, for example, a holistic exam, testing the stool for blood, a colonoscopy, we need to find out exactly what is causing this. Perhaps an ultrasound of the liver. Why are the liver enzymes so high? I mean, does TNF train way harder than Coach Greg? I mean, why are his liver enzymes so much higher than mine? I abused steroids for years. I dieted more than TNF. 59 competitions, 42 were natural. But I've never had AST and ALT quite exactly like this. And so what is going on? I think it's important to think, what is the worst case scenario? Because if he can do something about it, imagine how his life would be different. The hair loss that he's experiencing, he's starting to go bald. He's young. He doesn't want to have a hair transplant like Coach Greg. And so he's doing what many people would do, which was to use the topical dutasteride. Remember, I considered using dutasteride and finasteride, but I was concerned with the sexual side effects. I am 50. I do not want to have any problems down there. When you're already shut down, which Joel TNF is already shut down, you're at a much greater risk of permanent long-term sexual side effects, perhaps by tenfold. And so you really should reconsider taking dutasteride or finasteride, as the benefits that you can get from perhaps lowering your DHT are not worth it. It's not worth the long-term discomfort, problems of having issues with the downstairs. Let me explain it like this. Sometimes the human body can be perfectly healthy until a specific stressor is indicated. And so in TNF's case, without dieting, perfectly normal. The blood work, perhaps no problem. I asked him in his off season, his blood work is perfect. But when he goes on a diet, he adds in this stressor, a very low calorie diet. Suddenly, there's all of these problems. And so sometimes the stressor outlines what was already there but did not manifest itself until it was indicated with that stressor. For example, myself, I have asthma. When I'm not sick, hey, I'm racing bikes, I'm great at cardio, I'm super fit. You would think, this guy has no problems. Clearly he's healthy. Lungs are better than most. Then I get caught with a little cold and I almost always develop bronchitis or pneumonia. And so clearly my lungs, my pulmonary reserve, it's way worse than most, perhaps 1.5, 2 standard deviations below the mean. I get sick, and I get sick worse than ever before. And so the sickness, the catching a cold, is the stressor that indicates that I have a problem. For Joel, TNF, the diet is what presents the problem. When normal people diet, they don't have 160 nanogram per deciliter. When they get down to 10% body fat, their whole bodies don't shut down. And if they do, they aren't cut out for natural bodybuilding. And so the stress test is the extra burden on their heart. And for Joel, the stress test is the low-calorie diet. And so my recommendation to Joel is that he pulls out of the show, he stops and retires from competitions. I don't think people follow him to see how well he's going to do in his bodybuilding competition. I think he has great information. He's an excellent coach, and that despite the fact that maybe a few people will watch him less if he's not competing, if he isn't at single-digit body fat, we don't need to perpetuate the problems of maintaining single-digit body fat. It's like he isn't Tristan Lee. He doesn't need to be 5% body fat year-round to get views. For Tristan Lee, he says, look, this is no problem. I'm healthy all the time. Perhaps he is. I haven't seen his blood work. But for TNF, if he continues down this path, competing, dieting for months on end, the problems are only going to get worse. The blood work proves that he is not healthy. Visually, he has big biceps, chest, abs. He has all of this. But the blood work, it tells a different story. I would suggest he retires, pulls out from the show. I don't know what he's going to think of this video, but hey, I'm just doing my best to try to help. If you're interested in getting your own blood work to see how healthy are you really, should you pull out of your show? Should you be on performance enhancing drugs? Is Natty actually better? You can go to AlgoRx and use code Greg for your discount. Or of course, you can use natural supplements from HTLT. You can use code Greg for 15% off. Subscribe, click the bell button, comment to boost the algo. Don't forget to watch one of those two bloops. And if you're interested in being sponsored or being an ambassador of HTLT supplements, or if you would like to carry my supplements into your gym or store, or being coached by myself and my team, there are links you can click for that as well. And until next time, I am out.